Welcome to today's Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to take you on a journey back to the ancient Near East today. We're heading right to the epicenter of one of the most significant geopolitical and cultural events in human history. Picture this. It's roughly 960 BC, and King Solomon is about to embark on building the first temple in Jerusalem. Now, we're talking about a project of unprecedented scale and immense geopolitical weight here. It completely fused high religious ambition with unparalleled engineering and artistic mastery. It's a story that literally begins in the dust and stone of antiquity and somehow echoes all the way into modern esoteric traditions.
But here's the thing that so often gets overlooked. Constructing this temple, it wasn't just some local, isolated Israelite endeavor. No way. This was a massive, highly coordinated international joint venture. It united two absolute ancient superpowers of the region, the United Kingdom of Israel under King Solomon, and the powerful maritime city-state of Tyre, ruled by King Hiram I. Solomon definitely had the economic capital, and he had the grand ideological vision. But to actually pull off a project of this monumental scale, well, he needed something else entirely. He desperately needed the logistical, architectural, and artistic expertise of the Phoenicians.
Okay, let's dive into this and see how these two nations actually complemented each other. The cornerstone of this incredible project was a highly structured, formal trade agreement. You see, the Israelites lived in a primarily agricultural society. They were yielding massive quantities of wheat, barley, olive oil, and wine. On the flip side, the Phoenicians were maritime traders. They lived in these resource-poor, rocky coastal city-states, but they had access to incredibly high-grade raw materials and possessed elite, specialized labor. So what did they do? They traded. Israel provided the food to sustain the booming Phoenician urban populations, and Tyre provided the master architects, elite stonemasons, and all that beautiful bronze and cedar needed to build the temple. It was literally a perfect, mutually beneficial economic engine. And this alliance extended way beyond the immediate Levant. Solomon and Hiram actually set up a joint merchant fleet based out of the Red Sea port of Ezion-Geber. Together, they launched naval expeditions down to the legendary land of Ophir. And they were bringing back staggering wealth. I mean, gold, silver, ivory, exotic woods, all specifically to fund and decorate the royal quarter in Jerusalem. For Phoenicia, this alliance secured incredibly safe overland trade routes right through Israel down to Egypt and Arabia. And for Israel, it allowed a young, transitioning kingdom to instantly command the architectural prestige of an established Mediterranean superpower, a real game-changer for both sides.
Now, just think about the sheer logistics of acquiring these materials for a second. It was a marvel of ancient engineering in its own right. The interior of the temple required vast quantities of timber for structural beams, paneling, and intricate carvings. They needed the highest quality timber available, which meant they needed the prized cedars of Lebanon. Imagine the scene. You've got Phoenician woodcutters felling these massive, towering trees high up in the rugged northern mountain ranges. Then, in just an unbelievable feat of transportation, Tyrian workers moved these gigantic logs down the mountains, lashed them together, and floated them as colossal timber rafts along the Mediterranean coast all the way down to Jaffa. Finally, conscripted Israelite labor forces hauled these massive logs overland straight up the steep, unforgiving Judean hills into Jerusalem. Just an absolute logistical nightmare, but they pulled it off. So once the materials finally arrived, the actual architectural blueprint they used was distinctly Phoenician. The design of Solomon's temple heavily mirrored the classic Syro-Hittite Tripartite temple design that was super common in the Iron Age. It featured a specific three-part layout, an entry porch called the Ulam, a main sanctuary hall known as the Hekal, and an elevated, completely windowless inner sanctum called the Debir, or the Holy of Holies. And the stonework? It was just as spectacular. Tyrian stonecutters operated the quarries, shaping massive ashlar blocks with unbelievable precision. In fact, they were pre-cut so perfectly miles away at the quarry that, according to ancient tradition, no hammer, axe, or any iron tool was heard at the temple site while it was being assembled. They simply fit together like a giant silent puzzle. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer artistic mastery commissioned by Solomon. He specifically requested an elite artisan from Tyre to oversee the ornate metalwork and interior design. What resulted was a highly syncretic art style blending Egyptian, Mesopotamian, and Aegean motifs all together. This included monumental features like Jachin and Boaz, two colossal, freestanding bronze pillars at the entrance, topped with intricate lily and pomegranate capitals. Then you had the Molten Sea. This was a staggering bronze basin holding over 40,000 liters of water. To put that in perspective, imagine a small swimming pool resting entirely on the backs of 12 bronze oxen facing the 4 cardinal directions. Inside, the cedar-paneled walls were completely overlaid with gleaming gold leaf and carved with Phoenician motifs like winged cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers. It was a true sensory masterpiece.
But amidst all this marveling at the physical construction, we really have to hit pause for a second. Because the identity of the man who directed this breathtaking metalwork and artistic design brings us to a fascinating narrative pivot. So, what happened to this master architect? This is the exact point where the historical reality of stone, cedar, and bronze starts to cross over into the mysterious, allegorical folklore of Western esoteric tradition. First, let's look at the historical figure recorded in the biblical texts of 1 Kings and 2 Chronicles. King Solomon requested top-tier talent from King Hiram of Tyre, and the Tyrian king sent a master artisan named Hiram, sometimes referred to with the honorific Huram-abi, meaning master craftsman Hiram. He was a man of mixed heritage, the son of a widow from the Israelite tribe of Naphtali and a Tyrian father who was a bronze worker. Historically, he is described as a brilliant polymath. Actually, polymath might be an understatement. He was an expert in bronze casting, goldsmithing, weaving, engraving, the whole shebang. He arrives in Jerusalem, successfully completes his monumental tasks, and then he just kind of vanishes from the biblical narrative. There's no mention of a violent end or really any dramatic climax to his life at all.
But let's see how this builds into something entirely different centuries later. Fast forward to the early 18th century, and the folklore of Freemasonry begins formalizing a completely new narrative around this figure, who is now known as Hiram Abiff. In this tradition, he isn't just a bronze worker anymore. He is elevated to the supreme position of Grand Master Architect of the entire temple. The legend expands his role massively. He's now responsible not just for the decorative bronze, but for overseeing the structural integrity of the entire temple, and, crucially, for organizing a vast, unruly workforce of 180,000 laborers into an orderly, highly disciplined system of apprentices, fellow crafts, and master masons.
What's really fascinating here is to put these two versions side by side. Look at the stark contrast between the literal text and the esoteric allegory. For the biblical artisan, it's all defined by aesthetic perfection and technical skill. He does his job, he finishes the pillars and the vessels, and he goes home. Simple as that. But the Masonic legend? It completely transforms him into a tragic hero. In this ceremonial narrative, Hiram Abiff is confronted by unfaithful workers who are aggressively demanding the secret passwords of a master mason. When he absolutely refuses to break his vows of secrecy, he is murdered right before the temple is completed. So in this story, his core value isn't just about technical skill. It is about unyielding moral integrity, extreme fidelity to his vows, and making the ultimate sacrifice for personal honor. And what is truly remarkable is how the actual historical and archaeological facts of that ancient Phoenician alliance provided the perfect symbolic backdrop for these moral themes. Notice the overlaps here. In the legend, Hiram's grave is marked by an acacia sprig. That's a tough, evergreen shrub native to the Levant, perfectly symbolizing resilience and the immortality of the soul. Then there's the heavy focus on Phoenician geometry. Historically, we know Phoenicians were masters of navigation and mathematics. Allegorically, Hiram uses these precise principles to bring order out of the chaotic building site. And finally, the concept of the missing cornerstone. Remember how those massive ashlar blocks were perfectly pre-cut miles away at the quarry? Well, that meant the construction was incredibly interdependent. If you lose the chief architect, who holds the master plan, the entire massive project instantly freezes. The legend just beautifully mirrors the actual physical reality of ancient Tyrian stonemasonry.
So the crucial point is this. Through this legend, the building of Solomon's temple morphed from a literal physical construction project into a powerful, enduring metaphor. Think about the process of taking a jagged, unrefined stone straight from the quarry, what they call the rough ashlar, and meticulously carving it into a perfect ashlar, fit for a divine structure. That became a direct allegory for constructing a virtuous human soul. The discipline, the tools, the hierarchy of the laborers, all of it was reinterpreted as a literal roadmap for personal moral refinement and enlightenment.
Which brings us to our final takeaway. The alliance between King Solomon and King Hiram of Tyre was undoubtedly a massive triumph of ancient geopolitics, economics, and engineering. But its truest legacy might not be the physical temple itself, which, was ultimately destroyed centuries later by the Babylonians. Instead, the real legacy is the idea of the temple. I want to leave you with this thought today. How incredible is it that an ancient logistical agreement over wheat, timber, and bronze left behind a blueprint not just for a stone building, but an allegorical blueprint for moral integrity that still resonates in initiation ceremonies to this very day?
Thank you so much for joining me on today's Explainer, and keep questioning the incredible history behind the legends we inherit.